Hello friends and welcome back. I'm Nick. This is MSFS Flight Plans, and you may not realize it yet, but we are in the process of saving the world through simming. If you're new around here, one of my favorite ways to do that is to keep all of us in the air by showing off some of the best looking locations on the planet that I can possibly find. Once we get out there, I'll do a little research for the 24 hours prior, learn as much as I can about it so I can give you your own personal guided tour to make it all the more interesting as we go along. So today we're going to take a little trip along the west coast of Greenland to see a glacial landscape that is going to come very close to what we saw up in K2. If you saw that flight, it looked unbelievably good. This might even be better, if for no other reason than it's a very large expanse of some very nice looking glaciers. Again, not perfect. We're way up in the northern latitudes. You know how that goes, but it looks pretty good, really good. And as you can see, I finally decided to haul out the old C-130H by Captain Sim, which is the older of the two that he's released. This one's been out for 5 or 6 months now, and I know there's been all kinds of controversy surrounding that outfit, but to be honest, I really don't care. This is a decent plane, cost about 25 bucks. I think it's worth it. It's neat, not fully, definitely not study level, but fun to fly. I think it's a cool plane. So we're taking it up. And I couldn't really figure out what other kinds of planes you might see around here. C-130 I figured for sure you'd see, but this is the Alaska Air Guard livery. I tried to find another one to put on here because this is on the other side of the continent if this was where it was supposed to be, but the add-ons weren't working, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. So we're taking the default livery that comes with it. Let's hop in. I'm going to start it up with Control E because it's got a very lengthy and very fun startup procedure, but we'd be here for a while if we were doing that, and we're still going to have a few things that we got to turn off and turn on before we get going. So while that's doing its thing, let's take a look at little NavMap so you can see where we are. Here we are up in Greenland, and not a lot of airports to choose from up here, so I was very delighted to see that we could find a nice stretch with a perfect amount of distance between them, and everything's going to look pretty good all the way out there. But you get too far from this flight plan, you're going to see a little bit of sloppy stuff, so I would say fly this just as we are. If you want to do that, this will be linked in the video description. You can pull it into a little nav map and have fun with it. And we might even get some ships. That's pretty cool. So this is, if you have a little nav map and if you have the satellite imagery installed, this is from Mapbox. That's the one this uses, which can also be used in the pro version of the map enhancement, which I did renew my subscription, by the way, because I'm enjoying that so much. But you can see if we were using the Mapbox map, which looks good in most places, including that Iraq flight that we took and a lot of the others we've taken recently, as you get closer, not good at all. And if you get too close, look what happens. So you can't use that in here. The Google map looks pretty bad too. It doesn't black out like that, but it's pretty bad. So this is the latest version of Bing in the map enhancement, which may be as good as the default map. I just didn't have the default map on, so try it with the default first. It may look this good because the sim uses Bing Maps, but if not, this is the free version of the map enhancement. Just select the latest version of Bing and it will look just like what you're going to be seeing out here. So that's the trip. It's going to be about 33 minutes in the air according to the sim, and look, we're going to fly by some just great looking glaciers here. This area up here looks amazing. It looks so cool, so I can't wait to get out there and tell you about it. The only bookmark I've got is a little marker to tell us what altitude I need to be at by here, because there's not much else out here, but I've got plenty of things to talk about, and I'm sure it's going to be one heck of a trip. So let's get that docked back where it should be. Okay, a few little checks here before we get rolling along. I just need to switch my camera view real quick to look up overhead to make sure that everything got switched over the way that it's supposed to be. Okay, these guys need to be on, or else our gauges aren't going to work. Now those are good. Okay, that is set. That's good. And the equivalent of the GPU, the gas turbine compressor, is all set off. So I think that's good to go. Okay, we're good. Let's get back in our spot here. The other add-ons I have, other than the Bing map enhancement, all right, parking brake off. And let's go ahead and just check our barrel while I'm thinking about it. There we go, parking brake off. And we'll put our taxi lights on. I've got this airport is an add-on, and the one we're coming into is also an add-on. Those will also be linked in the video description, along with another add-on. All these are freeware that will delete all the trees in Greenland, because the default setting, there's a lot of trees, and I've heard from people that have been out here that there are not a lot of trees in Greenland. So that'll take care of that if you care to have them removed. And that's it. That's all we got for add-ons. So this one will cost you nothing other than this plane, if this is what you want to fly out here. This airport is called Maniitsoq Airport, and it's spelled very funny, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not. And I really don't think you'd see any real C-130s out here because this runway is only 2,500 feet long, and we are barely going to make it up off the end of this thing. So we just turned almost at the other end of it, so not real long. Much shorter, I don't think we'd make it, so I had to dump a lot of weight, including our first officer, just to make sure we'll clear it. We might still scrape the undercarriage on the fence at the end of the runway. It's going to be close, but we've gotten up every time so far. The other airports around here, about 100 miles north, there's another one. Runway is the same length, so that doesn't really help us in that regard, but there weren't as many glaciers between there and our destination. And then if you go south to the capital city of Nuuk, there's one that's about 3,000 feet long, so not much better. And that's quite a bit further south, so that wouldn't have worked for us, and there's some pretty bad landscape around there. So this is going to be what I think is probably the best of the best if you're wanting to take a flight about this distance. All right, we need to get towards the very end of this thing here. And we can see we got a little bit of overriding from the default stuff, but that's all right. It looks good enough. Off to the side there. And then once we stop before we take off, I got a few more checks. This one does have the C-130H, which again was the original that did not have GPS navigation when it first came out. It does have it now, but there's a few little hoops we're going to have to jump through to get it to work, so we'll do that real quick as we get everything else set up. I moved the month to July and set the time of day to about 10 o'clock because I think it looks the best for being able to see the most stuff really well. Okay, stomp on the brakes for just a second. We need to set this to nav, and I need to move the mic away for just a second because I need to look down and switch one more thing down here to my right. So the autopilot dial needs to be set on range localizer for that to work. Okay, taxi lights off, landing lights on. We need 50% flaps for takeoff. There's our little flap gauge over there, so keep it coming down. We got about 8 notches of flaps on this thing. And I do have my 3D printed DC6 throttles installed because, of course, I wanted to have a fistful of throttles for a plane like this. Check the barrow again. Everything else is in good order, I believe. So once we get up, we will hopefully make it off the runway, turn on the autopilot, and we'll be rocking and rolling. Okay, rotate speed is 110, and we're probably going to start having to give it a little back pressure even before that, or again, we're not going to make it, so let's do this. We're moving. And I don't know if that radar is supposed to work or not. On the little clipboard, you can click on something that says radar on, but nothing ever comes up on that little thing there, assuming that's what that is on the glare shield. Airspeed's alive, coming up on 100 knots. Man, we're going to be cutting this close. Alright, up we go. Oh, God. Alright, there's a little town out here. I'll tell you about that in just a second. Okay, so gears up. We'll keep the full takeoff power out for just a minute until we can get a nice positive rate of climb as we bring these flaps up. And you're supposed to bring them up in 2-notch increments, and you can see it makes a big difference on that nose attitude. Okay, autopilot on. Keep bringing those flaps up. And fully retracted. Okay, we're moving. So if you went just a little bit further than these islands up ahead, you can see the ones off in the distance. If we were closer, they don't look great. These are going to look pretty good. We're going to get a little bit of shading tiling that we'll see where it's kind of flashing a little bit on these first ones here. But that should settle itself out as we get higher and as we move along as well. Boy, a lot of glare, isn't there? Let's hop outside this thing real quick. Beautiful. Really cool. Okay, so I'm just watching our climb right here, which is almost at 2,000 feet a minute, so we'll pull that back to get that torque pressure to around the 15 level. And when you're messing with the autopilot on this thing, you've got to do it in the cockpit, which is kind of neat. I don't get to cheat by using all my external stuff. So I like this rate of climb. We're going a little bit fast, but that's okay. I'm just going to keep an eye on that. Alright, everything's looking good. Everything's in the green. So far, so good. So we're going to get up to about 7,000 feet, and then we'll trim her out, and we'll be good to go until we're coming in for our approach. Will be a great cruise altitude for this whole trip. Much lower than that, you're going to come awfully close to some of these mountains. So this town of Maniitsoq, the one we just left from, has around 2,500 people living down there, making it the 6th largest in all of Greenland, which, as an island, has a total population of around 57,000 as of 2022. Just keeping an eye on that airspeed there. And if you keep flying south from here, you'd hit the capital of Nuuk. I think that's how you say that, N-U-U-K, after about 30 or 40 miles. And again, their strip is a little bit longer at 3,000 feet, so you could go down there if you wanted to and then come north. But again, some of the terrain between there and here is not going to look all that great. Airspeed's looking good. Climb rate's looking good. No complaints there. Our power setting's looking pretty good. Landing lights off. And we'll go ahead and turn on our prop sync. Alright. So I was astonished to discover that there is archaeological evidence of habitation at Maniitsoq, the place we left from, going all the way back to 4,000 years ago. But the modern town started taking shape in the late 1700s as Danish traders came out here, and it sounds like that was definitely the place to be if you were in the market for a reindeer hide. I think that's what they were slinging out here. So let me just keep an eye on this for a minute as we get this thing set up. We got a little bit more time. The first of the really nice glaciers is going to be out here, and fortunately there's not a lot of those big drastic drop-off cliffs, so we're not going to get a lot of that. Most of them will smoothly transition down to the water, which is going to look just fantastic. And I think I forgot to reset the wind. I wanted to get a little bit more of a headwind for our approach, but this thing will have no problem coming down regardless of the wind direction. Look how detailed that is. That is just amazing. Being up here at this high of a latitude, and if it wasn't for that Bing map, all of the other options looked pretty bad compared to this, so this was just really exciting when I found out it looked that good. Okay, 1,000 feet to go. I'm just going to keep an eye on that until we get there, then I'll continue telling you about all the incredible things going on out here. And all I'm going to do is just flick the altitude hold button so we don't have to adjust the trim too much. We will have to do some trim adjusting once we start coming in for our approach, though. Alright, almost there. And we'll go ahead and set. That's probably good. And all I'll have to do is watch the airspeed. Look at this up here. Look at that glacier coming down there. Wait till we get closer. It just looks incredible. For reasons I can't even begin to fathom, the population has been in a state of decline out here for decades. And I'm kidding when I say that. But I read there's plans to build a huge aluminum smelting plant out there where we left from that's going to employ around 700 people. They've been talking about it for over a decade, but they have not put the plans in place to start it yet. And I don't know why they would pick that particular spot. Alright, judging by the sound of that wind, we're getting close. I don't know what the... Obviously, you can see where the overspeeding line is. I'm going to try to keep it between 250 knots and 300 of indicated airspeed. And we should be good. Look at this glacier down here. And I did set us up another little camera over here on this side. Look how good that looks. Wait till it gets out of that shadow. All this stuff just looks so detailed. Unbelievable. So as I mentioned before, I'm really hoping that 2024 will expand, particularly for areas like this, the water, the way it really looks a little bit further from the coastline, because it's a really brilliant blue color out here that just looks amazing. We'll see some little hints of that at some parts along the shoreline as we're coming in. That's a big glacier there. Look at these mountains. Just gorgeous. About 30 miles directly off the right side of the plain, if we were to head south from here, there's something called the Maniitsoq structure, which for a while was believed to be a 3-billion-year-old impact crater, which would have made it the oldest we've ever discovered, but additional studies over the last decade or so have concluded that whatever it is most likely not from a meteorite strike. And man, I looked all over the place on the satellite maps to see if I could find anything interesting around there to look at, but there's nothing that I could discern. And the thing's not small either. But all the snow and bad satellite coverage is obscuring it. We're going to hop outside a few times because the view is just so incredible. Look at that. Now, I don't know if it would look as good up close like K2 did, but from up here, as you can see, it looks fantastic. Really good. Okay, since we don't have many other landmarks to discuss other than these incredible glaciers, I figured I'd research some interesting facts about Greenland as a whole. And as we do that, I'll continue to pause so we can gawk at the sights on the ground as we fly by. You know what? Well, let's talk about the plane first, because I spent about an hour rummaging through the history of this beast. The C-130 class was introduced by Lockheed Martin in 1954 and is still being produced, making it the longest continuously produced military aircraft in history. And as I'm sure all you guys already know, they have used these things for just about every kind of transport operation you can imagine. And since it's designed for pretty rough terrain, both in the air and on the ground, it can operate just about anywhere too. This is just stunning. I should have done this a long time ago. I guess it's just because the other flights I've taken out here without doing anything with the maps look so bad. So I would say try this with just the standard default Bing first. I don't know how much the latest version really improves it, and you can just always switch to that if you want to if it doesn't look this good, but this is just unbelievable. But they've used these things for troop hauling, troop dropping via parachute, medevacs, firefighting, aerial refueling, coastal patrols, weather recon, and of course my favorite variant of all, the AC-130 gunship, an absolute nightmare of a plane if you're on the receiving end of that thing. So the other version of this, which is the E, which would have been an earlier variant by about 12 years as far as the production runs, was released by Captain Sim also, I guess maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, judging by the date on the YouTube reviews and tutorials. And I was watching John Beckett's channel, and I couldn't see anything on the inside that looked any different. It looked exactly the same as far as I could tell. The only thing he mentioned that was really different is that one does not have the GPS navigation. So I don't really know what the difference is. And that one came out, I think, priced at around $40, but right now it's also $25 in the sim marketplace. So, if you know what the big difference is with that, there might be some reason for me to get that one as well, but if the only difference is GPS, I'll just stick with this one. I think we're going to have a bit of a map transition up here. You can see the terrain looks a little bit darker, still looks good, but not quite as detailed as the stuff right next to us here. Okay, so let's get back to Greenland. It is officially an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark, which I did not realize before this flight, along with the Faroe Islands on the other side of Iceland. With an area of about 836,331 square miles, it is considered the world's largest non-continental island, and looks to be bigger than all of North America, definitely bigger than Africa on most flat maps, so check out a globe if you want a more accurate depiction of it. It's just slightly smaller than Venezuela, to frame it with something a little bit closer to the equator. And listen to the creaking sounds as this thing's rocking around. And make sure if you fly with the live weather, turn the snow off, just like we did in K2, or you're not going to see all the details of these glaciers down here. I'll try to remember when we're done to compare the two satellite maps when we're done, so you can see how big it is in relation to Venezuela in real life. So it'll also show you just how distorted Mercator projections are. All right, we got a little bit of a map seam right here, which is fine because the glacier got caught up in the better part of the map here. Just stunning. And if you look down there, oh, it's a little bit too hazy. That looks amazing down there if there was no haze. That glacier right over there. It's huge too. So as I mentioned earlier, it's believed the very first people arrived out here around 4,000 years ago, most likely migratory cultures coming over from what is now Canada. But the first permanent populations were the Norse, who appeared around 1000 AD. And hung around until the late 1400s when the plague and some temperature changes that did not go in their favor wiped everyone out. And it would be another couple of centuries before anyone tried to resettle Greenland. And it would be the Scandinavians again, this time a little bit more Dane than Norwegian, with Denmark gaining full control in 1814. Alright, this is that really cool area coming up here. So we got glaciers coming down this side, and if we could see them a little bit, I couldn't come over too much further, we wouldn't see these guys. There's glaciers, even more of them coming down this side. Really looks impressive. And you can see there's not a lot of green in Greenland, and that was not an accidental irony, the naming of that. According to the Icelandic sagas, Eric the Red gave it that name to attract settlers after he was exiled out here in the 10th century. And whether that worked or not may be up for debate. The fact that anyone would willingly decide to move out here is astounding to me. So maybe everyone just assumes all the trees are on the other side of the island. God, look at that. That is crazy. Let's hop outside again. Look at that. And the mountains are perfect, the glaciers are perfect, even the coastlines look good. A little bit of drooping right down by the water where the cliffs get a little bit steep, but other than that, just unbelievable. And these little glacial pools down here, and they do have the correct color, because the water is not sticking out far enough for them to change that, which is just great. So that'll give you a sense of how blue the water can be, and we'll see some more spots as we're coming in for approach where it's even more blue than that. But along with being the world's largest island, it's also home to the world's largest national park. Established in 1974, Northeast Greenland National Park is 375,000 square miles, which is definitely a whopper. And if all that's not enough to brag about, Greenland also holds the title for the lowest temperature ever recorded in the Northern Hemisphere. On December 22nd of 1991, one frosty thermometer logged negative 93.3 degrees Fahrenheit. But in the capital of Nuuk, the average summertime temps reach a balmy 50 degrees, which is probably why it's such a big destination for all the jet setters, maybe. See that little stream running down from that glacier there? It's almost too much for me to handle. It looks too good. So I have the graphics turned up really high because it can usually handle it. Sometimes if I turn my head too fast, you can see we get a little bit of stuttering, but by and large, and this plane kind of devours performance too, so if you're in something simpler, you can probably set them up pretty high. Amazing. Really, really amazing. Aside from being a lot of fun to look at, all this ice in the central part of the island has taken a toll on the landscape, with the weight of it turning the whole place into a gigantic bowl, with the center of it sitting almost 1,000 feet below sea level, which creates kind of an interesting phenomenon. as you head further inland, most of the ice flows away from the coastlines into the interior. And there's even some speculation that if we could melt all of the ice away, we would see that Greenland is not one huge landmass, but actually composed of 3 big islands that are separated by some narrow straits. Although that has been the subject of some debate. I guess no one's been able to dig down deep enough or probe deep enough to find out yet. And if you look at some maps of the extreme northern parts of Greenland over time, you'll see that the ice is rapidly disappearing as global temperatures rise, and the air up there is apparently too dry to produce fresh snow. And that's not a recent problem. The ice has been receding faster than it can be replenished each year, going all the way back to the early 1900s. And even out here, there's a lot of ice-free areas. And we're getting pretty decently inland. I imagine most folks watching this would probably shrug that off, but the whole ice melting bit, if you have any coastal property, you probably want to keep an eye on that. They said if Greenland loses all of its ice, scientists say it's going to make global sea levels rise by as much as 20 feet. Just Greenland losing its ice. So that's a lot of water trapped up here. Look at that water down there. Look how beautiful that is. The good news is you probably won't live long enough to see that happen. They say even in the most extreme climate change models, it's going to take centuries for all this ice to melt, but over the past few years, it has been melting very rapidly. And finally, moving to my favorite subject of geology. These rocks have been around for quite a while, many of them nearly 4 billion years old, making them some of the oldest on Earth. And just to give you an idea of how old that actually is, 4 billion years ago, the planet was still a glowing ball of magma with no liquid water and virtually no atmosphere, no free oxygen in the atmosphere. And at that point, it would still be another 300 million years before any trace of microbial life would appear. That was a long time ago. I was also kind of wondering if there was ever a time when Greenland might have actually been more green. So I checked out some animations of the breakup of Pangaea because, you know, everything has moved around a lot since then. Now that's a lot of ice. And every now and then we'll see these little specks, which look like they might be structures. I don't know if that's real or not, but they would definitely be remote. And we'll see a little bigger one out here somewhere. I don't know, did you see one right there? There's another one right there. Those look like igloos. And my conclusion about all that is that it was probably covered in vegetation for quite a while. Before it started its progression to the north about 200 million years ago, it was at roughly the same latitude where you would find the Carolinas currently, on the mid-Atlantic coastline. So if global temperatures were the same, they were probably warmer back then. It certainly would have been very green. We got another little map transition there. Okay, we're going to fly a little bit further and then come along to the channel that's going to run all the way up to our destination airport. So let's get some announcements out of the way. I haven't had time to make them the last few trips that we've taken. They were so short. If you're not a part of our Discord server yet, I cannot encourage you enough to be a part of that. It is an incredible community. And you can imagine what the conversations have been about for the last week. Everything has been about 2024. But we have flight supplements, people reviewing planes, scenery, all kinds of stuff. I post my schedule on there, and that's where I do most of my communicating. I don't say much more than one-liners in the comment section, but I do read all the comments if you want to comment on YouTube. And please do, by the way, with the slump going into 2024, the activity in the flight sim community I think has tapered off a little bit. And because I'm most certainly not doing this for money, the thing that fuels me is just hearing from you guys. So feel free to drop me a line. I read every single one of them. And hearing someone say they had a good time, or they're taking a new flight, or trying out a new plane, or learned something amazing, or just saying hi, drop me a line. I really, really appreciate it. It's a huge motivation for me. And if you have something unpleasant to say, let it rip. I'll even take some comments from trolls at this point. Okay, Discord, and if you want to get on the Discord also, you can be a part of our group flights when we take them. We just took one last week over the Virgin Islands. We hop in the voice chat over there. That was a really cool flight. Had about 7 or 8 people in that one, which is about the perfect size for group flights. Our next one will probably be in 2 more weeks. Look at that glacier there. That looks amazing. And then when it transitions to the mud flow there, gorgeous. The next one's going to be up in Colorado, set up by a guy who lives out there, and we're probably going to take it in turboprops, which we've not yet done on any of our group flights, so that'll be fun. And also, while we're in there, you can register a flight or suggest a flight for our quarterly flight plan recommendation competition. We've probably got a month left for this quarter, and we have 3 or 4 flights submitted already. But if you'll just go into the suggest a flight section, all I really need to know is where I should depart from, where I should head towards, preferably a destination airport, and if you know of a few spots to see in between, feel free to suggest them. If not, if it's good enough, I'll find them on my own. And if it's makes the cut to load up as a recorded flight. We'll get it up there. At the end of the quarter, we'll vote as a sim community, and the winner gets a $50 gift card to the sim vendor of their choice, which may go up as YouTube continues to pay me. So far, I've been paying out everything that YouTube has been giving me, which is not a lot, but fortunately, I don't need the money from that, so I want to give it to you guys. A lot of fun. Our next flight will probably be out to Ethiopia. Speaking of flight recommendations, a couple of our guys have said, hey, you need to check out some areas in Ethiopia, which I have not really flown over much, so I'm going to go do that. So that might be the next spot that we head to. Okay, once we come over this ledge here, I'm actually going to start coming down a little bit, so let's adjust that with this little thing down here. If I can get it to work. There we go. So I found about for every 3 clicks, it's about 500 feet per minute of descent. And let's go ahead and pull back the throttles a little bit so we don't start overspeeding. And then lastly, again, included in this video description will be this flight plan, along with the global bookmark file. There aren't too many bookmarks on this trip, but for all of our other trips, that one file, if you import it into little NavMap, will put all the bookmarks we've ever had from any flight in there. So if you're looking for cool spots to see, and if you like to track your flights in little NavMap, you may find that valuable. And if you don't know how to use little NavMap or bring those bookmarks in there, in our how-to section of the YouTube page, I've got some very brief and to-the-point tutorials that will very quickly get you up to speed on all that stuff. So since this airport is at about sea level, I'm going to try to come down to around 2,000 feet before we level off. That's the plan of attack. As we come down here, you will see along the coastline where the water is much more of a brilliant blue, but again, we're only going to get a few feet away from the coastline to see that. But what do you guys think about this scenery? This stretch in particular is the best I've seen in Greenland. And I haven't flown all over the whole island because it's a really big place, but this is amazing. If you're going to take a flight out here, those more buildings? No, it's little ice spots. This is a good route to take, for sure. Alright, I'm going to come down a little bit more because I do not want to run out of space to keep descending. 3 more clicks. Okay, 50% flap speed is 183, which is higher than our gear speed, which is 168. So we need to be down at 2,000 and stabilizing and slowing before we start doing all that stuff. And then 100% flaps is going to be at 145. I think we can manage all that. I'm going to slow down even a little bit more, because right at the end of this channel here is where we're going to have the airport. And there should be one more ship maybe tooting around out here somewhere. Yep, we're getting a little bit more tiling transition there of the color difference. And I think that's because I had changed the brightness setting in the map enhancement app, and I was hoping that my rolling cache would keep it from doing that again, but we're going to get a little bit of that as we're coming in. I guess it didn't save it. So our destination is at the town of Kangerlussuaq. I think that's how you say that. Kangerlussuaq. Also a very long word with weird spelling. And this airport is only one of 2 civilian facilities in all of Greenland that can handle larger planes. This one that we're coming into has a runway that's roughly 9,000 feet long, so we're going to have no problem getting this baby down there. But they built it in 1941, and it was the U.S. military that did it under the code name Bluey West 8. And they started allowing civilian traffic in the 1950s, and even had a DC-6 circuit that was billed as the polar route that went from Copenhagen to here to Winnipeg to Los Angeles. Can you imagine what a flight like that would be like in a DC-6? Well, I may not have to imagine it, because I've got a DC-6, and maybe I'll just fly it. That would probably be really cool. And long. Probably a little bit long for uploading here. But that'd be neat. Man, I wonder what people were doing coming out here way back then, though. Because I bet not much was out here. Maybe they just had to use it as a stopover point. I bet they did. And in 2007, Air Greenland introduced a direct flight to Baltimore, which they already discontinued, unfortunately. But from what I could gather, I think this place is more of a local hub now, since modern planes have enough range that they don't need a stopping point for transatlantic flights. Look at this, there's hardly any ice out here, and we're getting pretty far up into the interior, too. That is wild. They were saying that starting around 2019, they started having what they call massive melt-off events. There's a little boat, see it down there? And they said it has really been disappearing quickly. So we'll see. Maybe in another 10 years there'll be no ice up here. And I'm glad I'm not living on the coast if that's the case. Because if that much is melting here, you can imagine what it's doing to the rest of the polar regions. You know what's really crazy? If the northern part of Greenland is too cold and dry for snow, what's going on down in Antarctica? Because, I mean, that's at the South Pole. There's another boat. Look at that. So that's interesting. I wonder if there's something about the weather up here in the northern hemisphere that is preventing it. Or maybe just the snow down in Antarctica is so old that it's just been there forever. But they're having some pretty big melting issues down there, too. Okay, we're at 3,000 feet, so once we get to 2,000, I'm going to go ahead and trim her out, click our altitude hold button again. which I'm kind of thinking I should have set up another camera angle because it's hard for me to see that, but we figured it out. There's some of that blue. Look how blue that is. So this whole area, I'll show you on the satellite map at the end, all this water is that blue. It looks amazing. And at the bottom of a lot of these glaciers, there's some little bergs that have been calved off, but it just cut it off too soon to be able to see it. I was really wanting to take a flight down around Patagonia, Chile, but the map, satellite coverage for all the maps is so bad down there. I could not find a stretch that looked good because a lot of guys had suggested we cruise down there, which is just a beautiful, beautiful area in real life. But the satellite coverage is really horrendous, unfortunately, so I could not find a good stretch. Okay, let's trim her out. And we should hold there. So, again, as you can imagine, I'm sure like you, 2024 has been on my mind. We've been discussing it non-stop on our Discord server. I'm bracing myself after watching every flight video that I can see, and even since that last flight that we took out at that big volcano, I've been trying to find more and more actual, I hate to say the word game, but gameplay flights, because the cinematic trailers are probably not what we're going to see in real life, and I'm finding that's probably the case. All of the cinematic cuts that I've seen have been on the ground, which does look amazing, but this is a flight simulator, not a ground exploration simulator. Up in the air, I'm a little bit concerned. But I think the great thing about that is, I was telling our Discord guys that Asobo has taken care of all of the stuff that modders can't take care of, like wake turbulence, adding all the ships out here, doing all the glider airports, changing the user interface, leaving the world open to our modder community, which I was very concerned might be hurt pretty bad if 2024 was too good, if that makes sense. I wanted something for those guys to do because they are such a vital part of the community, so I think we're still going to have that. But I'm bracing myself that it may take a year or so for them to really get it up to snuff where most of the world looks as good as most of 2020 does. Granted, there's some horrible spots in 2020, but I saw a lot of horrible spots in 2024 too. So maybe not some big changes there. But I'll tell you one of the things that I'm absolutely the most excited about. I read a little blurb that there, if you saw that Bush plane review from Parallel 42 while we were flying around out there in California, I had mentioned that I thought it would be a great idea, if anyone cared about my opinion in that regard, to set up a subscription service of some kind whereby you could do the equivalent of renting planes, as long as you had the subscription. And it sounds like they've built up some kind of rental interface with it, where you don't have to necessarily buy the plane, and if you do decide to buy it, they're saying they're going to discount whatever you paid to rent it. Which is really, really exciting for me because, as you guys know, I like to switch planes a lot, and I've got some planes where I bought it, flew it around for one flight, and I haven't gotten into them again, so there's 20 or 30 bucks down the drain, you know, if I don't get into them again. And to be able to rent it for a few bucks, awesome. And if it's really good, just buy the thing, which is fantastic. And in addition to that, they said they're also revising the rating system, which I think is just great, because if you guys buy a lot of add-ons like I do, every so often you'll find someone who is obviously just doing a pump and dump, where they bill it as something amazing, throw a few awesome thumbnails or screenshots in there, you pay the money for it, get in there, and it's not great at all. So I think allowing people to give some more details about that will help a lot. It's going to help the guys that are really good at it rise to the top, and hopefully suppress a lot of the guys that are just doing the get-rich-quick stuff. And there's a few of those guys out there too, unfortunately. Okay, this haze is obscuring the runway a bit. It's dead ahead of us. So we're just going to keep heading in that direction. As we get closer, I'm sure we'll be able to see it. Look at this scenery. Look how detailed that is. Up in Greenland, for crying out loud. It's looked like that for the whole trip, with just a few map transition spots and a little bit of that tiling, which was probably my fault as it was transitioning back and forth because of me trying to adjust the brightness. That is just unbelievable. Even right down to the water line, other than the masking constraints, which again hopefully will be fixed in 2024, but maybe not from what I've seen. So the bottom line is, initially I was honestly a little bit depressed about, because for me obviously things looking great on the ground is the most important, and if it wasn't going to look as good in 2024 as this, I was a little bit discouraged by that. But I think as we give it time, as we get people in there, as the modders, I mean, you can redo a whole country if you want to. So once the modders start doing their thing, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. Okay, one more turn here, and I'm going to go ahead and take the autopilot off. Start slowing down to flap speed. And then we should be able to start seeing the runway. So once we come down, we'll take a real quick look at the satellite map, because there are a few things I want to show you. There's the runway. Not the least of which is how big Greenland really is once we compare what we see on a Mercator projection to the size of Venezuela. How's our wind looking? Alright, we got about a 9-knot crosswind, which is definitely going to be manageable in this thing. We do need to slow down some. Alright, trim it up a little bit. I am using my external trim, which will work, just because it's too much to keep looking down while we're coming in for our approach here. So we'll check that out. This airport I think looks really good for freeware. They did a nice job on this. The performance drain is not too much. We might have just a little bit of stuttering on the ground, but it's not going to be too bad. We need to slow down some more. I got to get down to 183 to get the flaps out. I got the throttle cut right now. I feel like this thing shouldn't be quite that slippery. Alright, I'm going to nose up some. Once we get the flaps out, that'll slow her down. There we go, that's probably good enough. I'm going to have to trim them down some. No problem, we're at 50%, very good. And now we can get the gears out. That should all slow us down pretty good. So I think this runway is like 9,100 feet, very, very long. But why people would come out here other than having to stop over and get some gas or grab a bite to eat, I do not know. This is in the middle of nowhere. Almost all the population of Greenland is down along the coast there. And once we get under 150, I'll throw out that... I still have the throttle cut. We'll get those last flaps out. Maybe I didn't dump enough weight. We're fine. We got tons of runway here. We'll just flare for a while if we need to. Okay, we got full flaps out. Everything's looking good. And I'll probably need to bring the power up a little bit here once we start getting a little bit closer and smoothing this out. I don't think we're going to hit that first taxiway, so I'm going to try to nail the second one. Shoot, we may. We'll see. And I think the approach speed is supposed to be around 125, which we appear to be tracking on pretty well right now. Happy to say we're a little bit high, but again, we do have tons of runway. And we got our reversers. Throw it into beta. I'm just going to cut the throttle and come on in. We got plenty of speed. So off to the left, I don't think that's the modded up area, but you're going to see once we get down here, they got some really nice looking hangars and stuff. Burn it off. Burn it off. That's fine. We need to get to the second taxiway anyway. Nice and easy. Down we go. I've also been wanting to take a flight around Antarctica. I've been looking for all kinds of areas where we might be able to find a decent looking spot. Alright, throw the reversers on. But so far I've had no luck. I've tried all the different map enhancements. Every now and then you can get a nice little pocket. I found a really cool volcanic ring island that's a little bit north of that peninsula stretching up to South America, but it was just that looked okay. Everything around it looked pretty bad, so maybe we'll take a very short helicopter flight just to show what that looks like, because it's pretty doggone cool. But if you know of any spots in Antarctica that are a decent stretch that look pretty good, particularly with the map enhancements, because I don't think you're going to find anything like that with the default maps, let me know, because I really would like to take a trip down there. Just let me know. Okay, so we have an Air Greenland hangar over there, and we're going to come in by the Arctic Command hangar down there. Nice little touch. Nice little touch, because as you can see, everything else is pretty defaultish out here. So thank you to whoever recommended I pick this plane up. I actually got it a while ago, I just hadn't had a good flight to take it. I think this was just perfect, and I was so hesitant after all that griping about Captain Sim, and I read that whole dramatic unfolding. But again, if you're just pumping out good stuff, even one good thing, I'll buy it. If you put a lot of good work into it, you can pump out a million bad things. If you have one good thing, I'll buy it. Fantastic. Alright, so we'll just stop right over here. They don't have a little guy out here for me. It might be by that first taxiway. We got some cars down there. Alright, here we go. Park it. And we'll shut these guys down. And put the parking brake on. Let's just watch the engines power down. Very neat looking plane. Really did a great job of that. And for a while, this is the one that had no internal modeling at all. It was just external. So now he's brought himself back up to speed by doing a really good job, in my opinion, on the inside. Okay, let's look at this map real quick. Let's blow her up and take off our centering, take off our trail. So again, if you just want to throw a little bookmark or something out here, the one thing you really want to pay attention to, I thought that this glacier right here looked pretty cool as we were coming in on that one. And then this one looks cool. And if you look down this way, this is where it was really hazy. This was the one in the distance. That is a beautiful glacier. And you might even want to come over here and take a better look at that. This one also looks pretty good here, but this area here, for me, is the highlight of this trip. It looks amazing. And if you were flying the other direction for some reason, it looks maybe even better on this side. So that's a really cool area right there. This glacier looked amazing. That's the one that turned into that little mud flow there. We can't get too close on the map box map, or it's going to go bad on us. And then we came on in there. But to give you a proper size equivalent, so here's Venezuela here. That's the actual land mass size of Greenland. Not the same shape, obviously, but a little bit of a stretching that goes on with these Mercator projections, so that's what happens. Not quite as big as Africa, but it's big. Biggest non-continental island. So that's it, guys. Again, hop on the Discord server. If you're afraid of Discord, if you've never been on there, if you're an older guy like me, I just turned 48 today, by the way. Today's my birthday. So I'm approaching 50. I was scared to death of Discord. I thought that was just for teenagers and young kids that want to get in there and cause trouble, but it's not. It's so easy, so awesome. Great conversations. You can join our group flights, recommend flights, all that cool stuff. Hop in there. Everything you'll need for this flight is included in the video description, so check all that stuff out. Again, if you don't know how to use little NavMap, I got the tutorials in our how-to section. I want to give you everything you need, make it as easy as possible, and for this one, all the stuff was also free, which is just great. So probably Ethiopia for our next flight, and I got to tell you, I can't wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.